Greetings, you magnificent champions. Joel Clark here, publisher of Lone Wolf Fists. Doing the tech edit some more today. I've been pecking at it every day this week. I am currently on I've just completed page 127, which is the Art of the Sorcerer, which means I'm right at the tail end of the character chapter. Chapter 2, of course, was one I was really dreading. It was very rules heavy, and every time I go back to this chapter, I feel like I find some other really fundamental part of the game that's broken that I have to fix. This time, it was not quite that bad. There were a few little facelifts I want to do on a couple of techniques. There were a few where I smoothed them out a little bit so that they would play a little nicer with the other parts of the game. But for the most part, the design principles that I laid down in this chapter are still holding strong. Let's see. I have thoroughly reviewed the whole chapter, and all of the internal logic meshed together really nicely, with a few notable exceptions, one of which I just got done, aka the Art of the Sorcerer, which I just rewrote a little bit, un poco. Unhollow landscapes sucked. One of the great things about this very last editing draft is that I now have a complete text to work with. I know what all the monsters do, I know what the power scale looks like, I know what all the vehicles look like, I know what the domain management mechanics look like. I now know what all of that looks like. I actually can look at it and reference it and see if it all fits together nicely, and it will make one complete and satisfying experience. And when it doesn't, I can note it very easily. So the Unhollow Landscape wrote these rules while I was pretty burned out and dry from having written all of the Kung Fu rules, and I was just trying to get through these chapters as quick as possible. And I was like, okay, I need to really squeeze my creativity and make these things work. I had Rebbe Ra as my de facto sorcerer supreme of evil for old school trashy anime. He's a wonderful Western style sorcerer. It's all pentagrams and demons and Cthulhu monsters and Western myths like what is the one they always the Pandora's box thing. Like so he's a very European-y kind of wizard filtered through an anime lens. So he's a cool character, very unique in terms of characters that I've seen in anime. I'm sure there've been some imitators, and there's been more than just him as a Western style sorcerer. I know that Western style sorcery stuff was like a really big part of it, like Full Metal Alchemist and things like that. But he's maybe my favorite character of all of that stripe, of all of his wonderful caste, and he's certainly one of the OGs of the scene. So I use him a lot whenever I think of like, okay, what do I want a sorcerer to do? My Mockingbird Emperor is kind of just a version of him. Who's the bad guy from Ninja Scroll? That guy too. It's like him, the bad guy from Ninja Scroll, Kenshiro, is that his name? I can't remember. And then Count Lee from Vampire Hunter D, who's another wonderful OG villain. OG anime villain. Anyway, so I wrote those rules prior to having all the domain mechanics hammered out, prior to having any entries in the demon entry, or in the bestiary for demons or any real ghost or monsters. I had a couple of ideas, but they were still pretty scattered at that point. Excuse me. I really wrote it before I'd written any content for the game, like fields or tracks or things like that. So I didn't know how those felt in play. I have since made an entire adventure module that really sings very beautifully in play. It's something that they're going over now that I've got the newest version of the rules out, but for the most part, I'm really satisfied with Blood from God's Eye. It's about what I wanted the game to feel like. It's very, very close in the initial attempt to make a module for this based on the earlier version of the current way the rules are going. Like the most recent beginning of when I began the most recent draft of these rules, that's what I wrote to introduce them. And all of those principles that I laid down way back then are still what I'm working on now. So that's how I knew I got onto winners, is that they're still working and they did what I wanted them to do. So because I've done that, and I had to brainstorm ideas for it and figure out, like, how do I want this to work? And I used a lot of natural language to describe the effects, and I used a lot of non-system thinking to kind of, like, introduce ideas like pacing. Like, there's that demonic ritual that I think it's called the Starving Tiger Emperor, starts casting, and then it has that effect that kind of boils out every day, and it gets worse and worse as the days go by. So the players have this clear ticking clock that's showing them that, hey, look, you've got to stop this guy or there's going to be big consequences. It's up to you. No one else can do this. I'm a big fan of that. That's a really good call to action, and it's something that catches their attention, and it has real ongoing effects for the way they have to approach the game. It shows that this guy is going to be doing this on a bigger scale as he gets more power. So I had to do stuff like that. I had to think really creatively and then outside of the sort of linear way I was structuring, like, okay, here's how these ranks work, here's how the spirit chart works. I was thinking more like, if I was going to run this game, what are the tools I would want as the GM? And that got me thinking in a new direction, and it gave me another approach to how this works. So I had already written these rules prior to that, and I just came back to them now. So it's been a little while since I've really seriously dug into them. I've done several versions of the rules since then, or several updates to the rules, little facelifts for the most part. But this last one has been the most comprehensive one. It's the one where I looked into the domain management chapter and I really, really worked with it. And that really got me thinking about playing this game as a strategic and tactical exercise, and it got me thinking about, like, okay, how do players approach this? What do these resource rules mean to them? How would you approach this if you had an eye towards conquest? Like, suddenly this is kind of an extension of your character. What does that mean? Like, what does the tactical landscape look like in those circumstances? And it was very much an extension of the way players interact with the mechanics. There wasn't such a line between GMs and players anymore. GMs kind of played characters the same way that a player would play a character. They played them like they were intelligent actors with resources and powers at their disposal, and they could make certain limited moves. And the moves they could make informed the kind of tactical game that surrounded the experience of the players. And at some point, players get to invest themselves in that and join that game as well, and then they became much more active players in that regard. So now that I have that, like, expanded, like, domain level play experience with the game, I can come back to the unhallowed landscape rules and look at them, and I can look at them in the light of, okay, what do they actually do? Does anyone want that? And they don't do a lot. Right now, they do something that doesn't actually matter in the game. They make insubstantial demons substantial, and they make the ephemeral laws of hell real for characters. Well, there's none of those that are in the game at all. There's no insubstantial demons, first of all, and there's no ephemeral laws of hell. Like, there's the summoning rules that you can summon demons, but it's not clear that would apply to player characters or any mortals or anything while they were in a unhallowed landscape. So they don't do anything. Those are just wasted word count. That doesn't interact with the mechanics. It doesn't describe a phenomena in natural language that makes any real difference to anything. It's an older draft based on stuff I thought I was going to do that I didn't wind up doing. So one of the benefits of going through this very final draft is being able to just read everything I've written in sequence and ask myself, okay, what was I trying to do with this? And what I was trying to do, when I really thought about it, was I was trying to make the Demon City Shinjuku from Demon City Shinjuku. I was trying to make what was effectively a sorcerer's realm that they had a sort of, like, mystical control over. And so I updated the rules to do that. And this newest draft is much stronger as a result. So here's what they do now, after I brainstormed this for just a couple of minutes. First of all, in the sacrifices for these, they always require a blood sacrifice. Actually, I should update all of these a little bit. But now one of the other things you can sacrifice, aside from mortal schlubs, is for the larger sacrifices, you can sacrifice minor heroes or lone wolf fists, or at the highest level, a sworn brotherhood of lone wolf fists, which I think is nifty. Let's see here. I'm going to cut that. Do that here. Just realize that 1 plus 3 plus. I just made these too high. Doot. Better. Okay. There we go. Okay. So, the first thing they do is they increase all of your sorcerer's rituals by category. Not by rank. The original thing was 1 rank. This is a category. So, that's usually about 2 ranks in the effect chart, or it is 3 ranks when it comes to summoning the dead. So, it just makes you a better sorcerer. It makes that more accessible to you. I think that's fine. You're aware of everything that transpires in the unhallowed landscape as though by a rank 6 spirit action. That's already well defined in the rules, so that's a really good appeal. You can also invade the thoughts and dreams of those who dare enter your realm, so you can attack them not physically, but with magical attacks, curses, social attacks, all the other kind of stuff. You can do all the kind of magic mind messing with you stuff that, again, Rebby Rock could do, you can now do. And you don't have to be in your unhallowed landscape to do that. It's just kind of an extension of your soul. So that's really nifty. There's a rich magic node that it just is generated within every field. So if you are able to get an entire field done, which I think you have to do, rank 9 and 10 sacrifices, or a Lone Wolf Fist, then you get a rich magic node, which is very, very useful, especially later in the game. If you don't use magic yourself, or magic resource yourself, you can sell it for a lot. So it's very, very good thing to have access to. And it makes it feel hellish that you are able to mine magical brass out of hell or whatever. That's neat. I made it so that sorcerers don't flare, not subject to volatility within their own unhallowed landscape. That doesn't spare their societies or their allies or anything, but it should certainly spare them. It's just, again, it's kind of an extension of their power. And it allows you to be a lot sneakier than you'd otherwise be able to be, and use a lot more power without necessarily attracting a lot of unwanted attention. It's a good way of getting privacy as you gather power for big, nasty rituals, which are much easier within the landscape. So it really does kind of direct you towards that Demon City Shinjuku style of play. In a single area, a hellish font forms. Now, this is an extension of the demonic prana thing that was in the original draft of these. It wasn't clear where that physically was within the boundaries of the territory. So a single area becomes a demonic font, a hellish font, and that specific place is where the evil prana comes from. As long as you have a sensory connection to that, you can draw magic from it. Also, the form technique of of Naraka's Cataclysms lets you draw a little bit more. So if you happen to be a Shadow Viper, you get a double dip in that. So I thought that was nifty. Here's my difference. The first version of this made it so that demons who were insubstantial acted substantially. Well, in this one, it is all insubstantial evil spirits may operate as though they had corporeal bodies against the enemies of the sorcerer while they're within the landscape. So basically, if they're on your side, they get a benefit. Substantial evil spirits, specifically including all demons, I should probably say corporeal evil demons. Corporeal, because they're not necessarily, they could be not substantial, but still corporeal. Can blend into the landscape, becoming frightening-looking architecture of statues, and may end this facade of spring terrible surprise assaults at will. So, let's see. Who served the sorcerer? Yeah. There we go. So now, since all the demons are actually corporeal, they have a special trick they can do when they work for you. This gives you extra value to summoning demons, and again incentivizes you to make an unhallowed landscape. So there. That's something you actually want as a sorcerer. None of those advantages are overwhelming, and they're all very thematic and flavorful, and they kind of accord with what we expect an unhallowed landscape to be. But this is one of the great benefits to this very final editing draft, is that if I want to rewrite parts of this game, I can. It's wonderful to have that level of fidelity and control. As a matter of fact, even though it's taking a long time to go through it, because I'm literally going word by word, page by page, in order, and editing literally everything. I'm deleting double spaces. I mean, I'm getting down to the nitty-gritty of this thing. I'm making certain that there's no awkward phrasing. Well, there's a little bit. This is my writing we're talking about. But it's awkward phrasing I can live with, so you guys are going to have to suck it up. But less awkward phrasing. I'll go with that. I'm making certain everything makes sense, and that everything incentivizes correctly, and everything, if it isn't necessarily balanced, at least is kind of on the same page in terms of general input to output. So it's been intense, and this chapter has been a pretty difficult one. But I'm really happy with it so far. Like I said, I didn't really have to change any of the foundational principles of the game, which is that's huge. This latest draft, I've been terrified of that every time I go back into it. Every time I monkey with anything substantial, like the domain mechanics I had to redo, as you guys remember, several times, I'm always terrified. I'm always like, is this it? Is this the bullet that kills my game? Nope. I've been able to just do very minor, shifts and moves and tweaks, and that's kept the foundations of the game intact. So it works in a really robust way. That's such a huge relief. And it indicates to me, hopefully, that this is something that I can give to other people and that they can get good results out of. So far, that's been the case. Everyone who's ran the game seems to be able to approach it in pretty much the same way and get good, uniformly awesome results out of running and playing it. So, yeah, I just wanted to pop on here and share that with you. Next is the Art of the Priest, so that's going to be interesting. Again, this is one of those things where I need to look into the bestiary entries and see if I actually made any elementals that will work with this, or any like minor gods or whatever that'll work with this. I may have to update those entries a little bit so that this all gives you something you can kind of grab onto from the core book. I imagine that as I continue to make content for this game and expansions, I'm going to have an ever more robust bestiary with new stuff for you to summon. Maybe I ought to clarify the categorical nature of that a little bit, but we'll see. We'll see if this all lines up, because I'm looking at this, the spirit effect chart, and then the bestiary with the creatures in it, and I'm going to reconcile those in this draft for the very final time. So hopefully it's pretty clear what you can and cannot summon with like just a normal guy with spirit, and then a priest and a sorcerer. Like I hope I make it clear whenever I get through this last draft. Like, okay, well, a sorcerer can summon this guy, but a priest can summon that guy. Hopefully, we'll see what happens. Anyway, that's it for today, children of the atom. I will see you guys later.